Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group, located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, we're talking about the Biden administration. We're spending some time taking a look at a couple different sectors, in particular, Joe Biden and his response to the pandemic, because we're coming up on the 1-year mark of Joe Biden's entire tenure in office, and he's been having a rough go of it. In fact, the media might be turning on him. Tucker Carlson yesterday had a little bit of a clip that I gypped for the program today that is a montage of all the media people sort of saying Biden's having a rough go. So we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at his schedule because it's been very, very light these last few days, especially when you consider all of the problems that the administration is currently facing. So we'll take a look at that schedule, and then we'll jump right back in and take a look what they have to say from Jen Psaki's position, from her perspective, because the White House did launch a new initiative today. Testing is now available. There's a website that they just launched, whatever it is, where you can go and order a test that's going to be sent to your home in 7 to 10 days after you've recovered. But anyways, they've got a program. And so Jen Psaki got asked about that today, in particular about why it took so long to finally get to this moment, especially when they had a meeting back in October. Apparently, some people from the Biden administration were on this Zoom meeting. They had a plan to roll all this out back in October, and they put the kibosh on that. So we'll check in on that. And then, of course, we got to go international today because Ned Price, you remember Ned Price? He went to Harvard. Ned Price is over the spokesperson with the State Department. He was announcing that Antony Blinken is going to be basically dropping everything and flying over to the Ukraine to make sure that that doesn't turn into a global catastrophe. So we're going to break that story down because we have a new statement from the Secretary of State. He's going to be detailing what the United States posture is relative to Russia and Pooty Poo over there. And so we're going to listen to what Ned had to say, what Secretary of State Antony Blinken is now saying, and we'll check in with John Kirby over at the Pentagon. He's the spokesperson who is now, hinting that we already have troops over there. There's already the National Guard from Florida over in the Ukraine, training the Ukrainian sources. The Russians are sort of slowly winding down their embassies over there. And so the question, of course, is, are they going to do a better job than they did in Afghanistan, bringing all of this to heal? Or is it going to be a repeat in some way, shape, or form? We're going to find out, aren't we? And I hope you join us over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. There's a form, looks just like this. And so if you're chatting away over there, that is the form to use, and we'll do our very best to get to all your questions today. Of course, today is a little bit of a shorter show because it is Tuesday, although most of the shows have been a little bit short lately since we're really only doing one segment. But I do have some additional content that will be released later tonight. I just have to edit them and get those situated. So we've got that. They're chatting away over there. We're also taking super chats. Yesterday, Beth Coddington sent one in. Looks just like this. Pops right up on the screen like that. Thank you, Beth, for that. And without any further ado, I suppose we should get into it. Shouldn't we? Then let's do it. Joe Biden, the president of the United States. Many people have been wondering where the heck that guy's been. We often on this channel take a look at his schedule. We're going to do it again. Let's take a look at it. Remember, this is the President of the United States of America, okay? This isn't somebody who's supposed to be a retiree. I'm just saying. Now, even though he is sort of in that age category, right? He's still the president. He signed up for this job. And so you'd expect to see a little bit more energy out of him. On Saturday, nothing going on. President had already left. He was already in Wilmington, Delaware. And Jen Psaki is going to be asked about this because many people in the media are paying attention now. Biden residence on Saturday, no public events. Sunday, president, no public events. Wilmington, Delaware. And then on Monday, you see some activity, but really, there are no public events because all this is just travel time. Now, it's Martin Luther King Day, right? MLK Day. The federal government is closed. But is he taking the day off? I mean, I know kids took the day off of school, but is President Joe, did he also take the day off of school? Did somebody wake him up? So nothing happens, of course, on Monday. Out of town pool call time in so some people are working. President departs. He leaves Delaware. Then he comes back at 8:05 p.m. The day's over by the time he gets back to Washington. And so you ask yourself, all right, look, he had a 3-day weekend, long weekend, like the school children. He didn't go and do anything on those days, probably stayed in bed watching cartoons. But the question then is he going to, get back into it when he starts on Tuesday? And the answer again is no. No, he doesn't. So 10:15, he gets the president's daily brief with his vitamins. President and the vice president receive the weekly economic briefing, and then that's it. We hear from Jen Psaki at 12:15. Meanwhile, the entire administration feels like it's sort of bursting at the seams. And it's not just crazy old Rob saying that, all right? Here is the rest of these crazy people saying it.
President Joe Biden has had a very tough week with setbacks for his agenda, COVID complications, and the Supreme Court blocking his vaccine mandate.
1 year in, Mr. Biden has the second lowest approval rating ever measured in the White House and has never been less popular nationally.
2022 is not exactly off to a good start for the Biden administration.
The country is frustrated. His party is frustrated. We're 2 weeks into a midterm election year, a few days away from his 1-year anniversary of inauguration, and it is black. It is very dark for him right now.
Now he's in the midst of what one famous children's book writer called a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad time.
Oh, well, isn't that just a shame? So, of course, many people are wondering, why is the media now suddenly coming out and sort of changing their tune on some of this stuff? Are they trying to save face? Are they, having a credibility crisis? Are they trying to change their tune because people are not watching the news anymore? I mean, the numbers are down dramatically across the board. And I think that's just everything. I mean, even on YouTube, right, a lot of the political stuff is sort of, it ebbs and flows. And so people are just kind of checked out from a lot of this. And that's why people are wondering what's the next thing that they're going to have to, launch into. Voting rights looks like those are stalled and failed. We've got, a lot of other problems that are resulting in this. How popular is Joe Biden? You can see 42.4% approve and 52.2% disapprove. So these are pretty high numbers. And you can see it looks like it might be trending in the upward direction. If you break down the polls, you can certainly see that the disapproval numbers looks like they're trending up. You can see back here, January 8th and 9th, we're trending around 44 to 51, whereas January 12th to 14th and 13th through 17th, we're trending up to 56 and 58. So it's like a 6-7 point swing in the matter of a week or two. And it's now getting into Donald Trump territory. Joe Biden is plummeting down. You can see he started the term when in his 1 year well above that 50% mark, but his gross incompetence, something that we've all been prognosticating for a long time here, has made itself evident. And so he is now just plummeting down into Trump territory. And so the question is, look, we got 3 more years left of this runway. There's a lot of game left in this game. Oh my goodness. And so is there anything that they can celebrate? Are they going to be cheering on anything? Well, they've got a new program that's rolling out today. Let's see how this goes. So at covidtests.gov, this is a new website, which is out and available today. They have a post that says this is up and running early, so we can test the site before our official launch tomorrow. We have tests for every residential address in the U.S. Please check tomorrow if you run into any unexpected issues. So it's a little bit of a beta test, which is good. I want government stuff to work and function, but we'll see if this one does. Get free at-home COVID tests, they say. So that sounds really nice. Do you get like a lot of them? Well, depends on what your meaning of a lot is. It says here, every home in the U.S. is eligible to order 4 free at-home tests. Tests are completely free. Orders will usually ship in 7 to 12 days. So you get 4 tests for your family of 4. You're going to get them shipped in 7 to 12 days, meaning you're probably going to get them in 10 to 14 days. So then we see order your tests now so you have them when you need them. But people need them now. That's the point. The wave is right now, not in 2 weeks. Okay. But they say if you need a test now, please see other testing resources. Visit free locations in your area. And so, okay, they're coming around on this thing, testing. It's actually embarrassing to me as hell that in the United States of America, the same country that can, send people to the moon through private companies, public companies, the same country that can raise a sunken aircraft carrier in a few years, that can rebuild, build Empire State Buildings and all of these things, can't figure out how to get tests to about 300 or so million Americans, 340 million Americans in 2 years. Can't figure this out. And so now that we're making a little bit of progress, it's going to take 7 to 12 days, but hey, at least we're going in that right direction. But the question is, what took so long? Why did it take 2 years? Well, Vanity Fair has an article, and Jen Psaki is going to be asked about this. So this is why we're going deep on this a little bit. Jen Psaki is going to be asked about this because I had a lot of issues with the testing. What was so problematic about even the at-home tests? Even during the Trump administration, why was this not something that was just everywhere? That you could, there's people I follow on Twitter saying that this stuff could have been ubiquitous and just everybody have them, even if they're low accuracy, you do them in high quantity. So you make up for the low accuracy by the high quantity, and you can basically test every day and dispose of these tests. Many different ways to approach this, okay? More than just sit at home and lock yourself in a bubble. A lot of different options here, but our morons in charge only picked the ones that they wanted to do. And, ubiquitous testing was not one of the solutions. And so here, Vanity Fair dug into this a little bit. And they said that, we're going through this COVID wave right now. We are going through this big bubble of cases as a result of the holidays. So why would they reject an October proposal for free rapid tests for the holidays? Why would the Biden administration do that? Catherine Eban wrote this back on December 23rd, and Psaki got asked about this today, and Psaki was not happy about it, as we're going to find out. She wrote this article, says, with Omicron cases spreading like wildfire, the White House is finally taking steps to make free antigen tests available to all. But this fall, Vanity Fair learned, it dismissed a bold plan to ramp up rapid testing ahead of the holidays. Frustrated experts explain confusion, distrust, and single-minded fixation on vaxing everyone left. So testing was on the back burner forever, right? That's all it was. They didn't care about tests because they were trying to just beat you over the head until you got the jab. So they didn't care about tests. And what did that result in? Well, arguably, right, the pro-test everything people say that it resulted in numbers that look like this over from the New York Times. You can see a big, massive spike. Now, back in October, when they were talking about this Zoom meeting that they were on and they were not being serious about it, would have been the right time, maybe in November, to start this program. Not start rolling it out when we're here. Right, we can see this difference here. It's pretty obvious. All right, that was over the last year. This is over the last 90 days. Once again, if you roll out testing when they're talking about it in October, things look a lot better. October 22nd was when this Zoom call took place. Officials from the Biden administration were there. They were developing a strategy for overhauling America's approach to testing. Shut down the virus. There was a 10-page plan Vanity Fair got a copy of. It would allow the U.S. to finally do what many other countries had done. Put a rapid at-home COVID-19 testing into the hands of average citizens, allowing them to screen themselves in real time and reduce the spread. The plan called for an estimated 732 million tests per month, a number that would require a major ramp-up of manufacturing capacity. Also recommended, right on the first page, a nationwide testing surge to prevent a holiday surge, okay? So, in other words, we have a group of people, experts, who are anticipating all of this happening, and the White House is on a Zoom meeting actually talking about it. The antigen tests at the center detect people when they're most contagious, though less sensitive, blah, blah, blah. It still works, right? They help people seeking assurance that they're safe to travel or won't accidentally infect vulnerable people. But the meeting attendees came away after the meeting with the Biden crew with mixed opinions. The White House, somebody said, quote, in baseball terms, was playing small ball, said Dr. Stephen Phillips, vice president of strategy. Says when it comes to rapid testing, they're bunting the players along, just bunting them along. Andrew Sweet said, oh, no, we think that this was very responsive, and he believes that this laid the groundwork for future announcements. An administration official says, well, we did not have the capacity to manufacture the over-the-counter tests at scale. FDA authorized only a handful of different home tests, and they couldn't make those fast enough. So you can see this is just gross government incompetence at multiple levels, right? So not only did the FDA sort of limit the possibility of multiple tests by only approving certain tests, and a lot of this started back during the Trump administration, no doubt about it. And so, okay, we don't have enough approved tests. Then of those approved tests, then we don't have enough manufacturing capabilities to increase those approved tests. Versus, and what's the benefit of this, right? What if you just had a test and you just told everybody, yeah, they're 80% accurate, okay? They're not 100%. But if you test every day and you show up positive, then you know to just sort of remove yourself from the equation. And if you test negative the next day and the next day and the next day, you're probably good again, right? And so you can sort of constantly measure. It's a different strategy, and people could have learned how to do a lot of this stuff. But the FDA said, you're too stupid, America. So you can only handle the things that we've approved. Everything has to go around through our government process, and whatever we just dump out of the rear on the other end of things is what you get. People who are tinkerers, the people who really solve problems and come up with solutions, they all got thrown off the internet for thinking freely, for challenging the process. Anybody with alternative proposals that went against the standard narrative was misinformation and disinformation and dangerous. So we didn't get any real creativity. We got a bunch of people who just sort of thought that they were very smart because of where they went to school, and they tried to mandate a solution rather than develop a solution. And it hasn't worked out. On December 2nd, Omicron threatening a new wave of imminent infections, Biden announced a smattering of small-scale plans that included requiring insurance companies to reimburse privately insured patients who buy at-home tests for as much as $35 a box for 2 tests. And we've talked about this here on the show. I mean, we went through this at length, where we went on Twitter and looked at the photographs of people waiting in lines for hours, they were saying. You can't find them. Nobody could find them. 4 days after that, the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, then seemed to deride the very idea of free nationwide tests. But we have those now. We have those now. They just published it, and Psaki's going to be asked about this in the next slide. So why back then was she so sarcastic? She said, oh, should we just send one to every American? She mused sarcastically. Well, then what happens if you and every American has one test? How much does that cost? And then what happens after that, right? So it's a bunch of naysayers. If you would just go get the jab, is what her argument is, nobody would need to test. Obviously, we're seeing how that's working out. So Jen Psaki gets into this with this young guy. I don't know the name of him or what news agency he's from, but he goes after Jen, and Jen is not happy about it, and she digs right back at him. And she basically scolds him in front of everybody. This clip is going around Twitter like wildfire, but it's also something where we get some very good details about this. So I broke this up into 3 clips. First clip is this guy, Steven. You can see him up here on the left. Steven is in the press briefing room, and he's going to ask Jen. And listen carefully as he speaks, because we're not going to be able to see him because the camera's only on Jen here. And you can see her little face. She's not happy about this. She's like, oh gosh, Steven, do you know why? Because Steven emailed her previously and said, hey, Jen, I've got some questions coming in hot today, and I need some answers. Remember that Zoom call that Vanity Fair wrote about? I want to know specifically what members of the Biden team were on that call, and why did they decline that plan that would have solved this problem that we're currently in and presumably made a bunch of people safer and alive. Here's how the question goes.
A few reporters in here today. I'd like to ask briefly about 3 transparency issues. The first one, I'm kind of amazed hasn't been brought up more in this room. That is that Vanity Fair reported recently that on October 22nd, a group of health experts from Harvard, the Rockefeller Foundation, and other groups proposed on a Zoom meeting with administration officials a plan to mass distribute coronavirus tests to homes before Christmas to prevent a winter surge of COVID-19 cases, but that they were told 3 days after that Zoom meeting that that idea was dead. So I emailed you about this yesterday and again this morning so that you'd be able to track down a firm answer on 2 details here. The first detail is which administration officials attended that October 22nd meeting. For example, did Drs. Fauci and Walensky participate?
Who was on the call?
Was President Biden personally briefed at the time on that recommendation before it was passed over?
All right, so let's pause on that real quick. So a lot of questions there, right? But going back to that Zoom call in October, said that the other people who were on that call that they talked to, They said that they got a phone call from the White House, said, you know that testing plan that you had to sort of have this surge testing so that we don't have this massive holiday spike that we're all in? They said that you told them the answer is no, the deal's dead. Don't even think about it. And then Jen Psaki came out after the fact and was joking about it to all the people, saying, what do you think we're like as competent as a European country? Do you think that we have functional intelligence here? That we can just come up with a plan to send everybody something in the mail? What? We're the U.S. government. That's way too complicated for us. We can't figure that out at all. And so this is something that they want to know, okay, well, which one of you dummies was on that call that couldn't approve of this plan? What's the name of that person? Was it Fauci? And of those doctors, did anybody go and ask Joe Biden about this? Anybody sit down with that sleepy old man and say, hey, you really want to stop testing everybody? Here's what Jen Psaki had to say about it.
Well, maybe people haven't asked about it because we've done a lot of what was discussed in that meeting that happened a couple of months ago, including massively expanding our testing program and capacity. And the issue at the time, which was a very small part of the conversation, was that the market had not expanded enough to at that moment in time be able to launch the website we're launching tomorrow. And the president, used the Defense Production Act, invested $3 billion to expand it, quadrupled the size of our testing capacity, and now we've ordered 1 billion doses. So good. We see that as our COVID team, the members who participated, saw that as a very constructive meeting, a good meeting, a lot of which we've worked to implement.
Okay, but you didn't answer, though. Who was on the call and was Biden briefed about it? Did he know about it? Because here's what it sounds like, Jen. It sounds like you really like the plan now. You really like this idea of testing a lot of people. 4 tests per family, 7 to 12 days. They'll show up on your doorstep after you're out of the hospital. So then you'll know for sure that you're safe. Don't have it anymore, which is great. So the question, of course, why didn't they rewind the clock and start this sooner? And so Mr. Steven, journalist extraordinaire, hero of the day, asks her again and says, Jen, but that's not what I asked. I asked you, and I emailed you about this earlier, Jen. Can you confirm or deny who was on that meeting and whether Joe Biden himself was specifically briefed? Can you tell us that? And Jen is not happy with this young man. Let's watch how this goes.
So the idea, though, to mass distribute tests to homes before Christmas and New Year's, that idea was not adopted. How can President Biden shut down the virus if he's not being briefed on these ideas? That's my question. So I'm wondering who were the advisors and was President Biden briefed on this idea at the time?
Well, I think I just answered your question, which you may not have been listening. Maybe you were waiting to read your next question, which is fine. But I just answered your question. Let me finish, Stephen. Stephen, I'm finishing. What I said to you just a minute ago is that we did not have the capacity at the moment. We had a very constructive meeting with this group. We agreed in the need to expand our testing capacity. That's why we quadrupled the size of our testing capacity and why the president had already used the Defense Production Act to invest $3 billion. But the market did not have the capacity at that moment to do what we're doing tomorrow.
I hear what you're saying, but that's not the question I asked. The question I asked was,
do you have another question? I think I've answered your question.
President Biden briefed at the time.
Again, I've answered your question. If you have another one, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next person.
Not answering that. Was President Joe Biden briefed? Yes or no? And she goes back, well, it's a supply chain problem. We didn't have the manufacturing capacity back then, but we do now because Joe Biden authorized the defense blah, 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 right? Nonsense. So that's a good answer from her, but you can see she's doing the little face palm here. She's like, this guy emailed me and he's asking about it, and I'm just going to have to just move on to the next thing. But he doesn't let her. He says, okay, hang on a second. I do, in fact, have another question for you, Jen. Now that Joe Biden has all of these gigantic catastrophes continuing to fall around him on a daily basis, why is he spending all of his time in Delaware? He's got a lot of issues here at home. 1 year of his presidency is like in 2 days. Poll numbers are in the toilet. Even his own media, his people on CNN are unhappy about it. So why is he spending multiple days in Delaware? And why can't we see what's going on in there when he's there? Let's listen to what Jen says.
I didn't get answers there, but I'll move on to another one.
Great.
The second question is that in light of President Biden's first year coming to a close, The data indicates that he spent a quarter of his days, at least partially, in Delaware. In light of that, will the White House be reconsidering the decision not to release visitor log information from his Delaware residences?
Well, the president goes to Delaware because it's his home. It's also where his son and his former wife are buried. And it's a place that is obviously close to his heart. A lot of presidents go visit their home when they are president. We also have gone a step further than the prior administration and many administrations in releasing visitor logs of people who visit the White House, and we'll continue to do that. Go ahead in the back. I think we're done, and we're going to move on. Go ahead in the back.
The Reuters reported this morning that Biden...
So she's not happy with that young man, Stephen, who did an excellent job today, who was really asking her some very important questions, specifically about Joe Biden living in Delaware most of the time. You heard his litany there. He's there, a lot of time. And people have questions about that. What's going on in there? Is he getting medical treatment over there? Is he getting propped up for his activities? He kind of goes away for a long time. Like, for example, if you look at his calendar, he's got a big press conference tomorrow. His first one of 2022. He doesn't do many of these. So he needs to rest up for this thing. Saturday he's off, Sunday he's off, Monday he's off, Tuesday he's off today. We looked at his calendar. He didn't do anything today. He got 2 briefings and went back to bed. Tomorrow he's got to have this press conference where he's going to take 3 or 4, I would guess, scripted questions and then ramble on for 25 minutes with his note cards on a very, very limited set of predetermined questions. And that's concerning when you have somebody who needs like 4 days of preparation to go out there and talk to the press. But this is what we have been seeing, and basically everywhere. Everybody's catching on at this point. Sebastian Gorka said that somebody from, I think, the Secret Service or somebody was saying that they just sort of wheel him in front of a window out there in Delaware, and he just kind of stares off into the sunset. Sounds like a beautiful, nice home, and I hope that a lot of people can enjoy that in the twilight of their lives or whatever. But not the president of the United States. Just an idea, just a thought, because we have a country to run and we have people's lives who are relying on the policy decisions that come out of this garbage White House. So Jen Psaki also had some PowerPoint slides, which I'm a huge fan of. We like PowerPoint on this show. I can't fault her for this, but this is what she came out with. And she's doing a little bit of compare and contrast, saying, listen, everybody, stop being so angry at us because we're doing a great job. 1 year ago, we had 812,000 unemployment claims. So sort of right in the, I guess, 1 year ago today. Now she's got 210,000. Wow, that's great. Unemployment back then, 6.4%. Unemployment now, 3.9%, according to her. Jobs created the year before, which is always a fun, it's always a fun metric. 9.4 million lost under the former president, but 6.4 million created this year. So it's like, what happened? It's like, well, a lot of those jobs came back, didn't they? So interesting. Now, progress on the pandemic. 1 year ago, when the vaccine was only a couple days old, maybe a month old, a fully 1% were vaxxed. But now 74% are vaxxed. Tremendous job, Biden administration. Well done. No at-home tests on the market back then. Now 375 million per month are now on the market. And back then, 46% of schools were open, but now 95% of schools are open. And so it's just, it's fun with numbers, and it's hilarious that they are comparing those things. But, if they want to pat themselves on the back for that job well done, that's fine. So we have a lot of that conversation about these at-home tests and so on. But then Jen Psaki is going to shift our attention to the international order, because I don't know about you, but we've been hearing a lot about the Ukraine, about Russia, and about all sorts of problem activities over there in that part of the world. And so Jen Psaki is going to get us up to speed, tell us what the White House's posture is on this, and then we're going to take our attention. We're going to see what Antony Blinken, what Ned Price, and what John Kirby at the Pentagon all had to say about this. Let's listen to Jen Psaki getting us up to speed.
But this morning, Secretary Blinken spoke with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. They agreed to meet in Geneva, as you noted. At that meeting, Secretary Blinken will urge Russia to take immediate steps to de-escalate. He will also fly to Kiev to consult with President Zelensky and Ukraine's leaders, and to Germany for consultations. As you also know, there is a congressional delegation that is also on their way there. And it's a note. I would note that just indicates that support for Ukraine has always been a bipartisan issue, and we welcome that. But where things stand right now, President Putin has created this crisis by amassing 100,000 Russian troops along Ukraine's borders. This includes moving Russian forces into Belarus recently for joint exercises and conducting additional exercises on Ukraine's eastern border. So let's be clear. Our view is this is an extremely dangerous situation. We're now at a stage where Russia could at any point launch an attack in Ukraine. And what Secretary Blinken is going to go do is highlight very clearly there is a diplomatic path forward. It is the choice of President Putin and the Russians to make whether they are going to suffer severe economic consequences or not.
Severe economic consequences or not, and basically saying that there could be an attack, it's imminent, could happen at any time. And Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, the same guy who was, largely responsible for our failed negotiations with the Chinese we talked about on this show, had a lot of problems with Afghanistan that we've talked about on this show. They're picking that same guy to go over there and settle this Ukraine thing with the Russians. So we'll see how that goes. Now, the Russians, of course, are already making moves. DNYUZ tells us that Russia is thinning out its embassy in the Ukraine, possible clue as to its next move. January 17th, this was posted. It says that the week before intensive diplomatic meetings began over the buildup of the Russian troops on the Ukrainian border, American and Ukrainian officials watched from afar as Russians began emptying out its embassy into Kiev, the Ukrainian capital. Kiev or Kiev? On January 5th, 18 people, mostly children and wives of the Russian diplomats, boarded buses and embarked on the 15-hour drive back to Moscow, according to a Ukrainian security official. So they're pulling up and abandoning most of their crew. About 30 more followed the next few days from Kiev, a consulate in Lviv, a western Ukraine. Diplomats at 2 other Russian consulates have been told to prepare to leave the Ukraine, a security official said, speaking on condition of anonymity. How to interpret the evacuation has become part of the mystery divining the next play by Vladimir. Thinning out the Russian embassy may be part propaganda, part preparation for a looming conflict, or part feint. Ukrainian and the U.S. officials say it could be all three. And so you heard Jen Psaki. You see what the Russians are doing. She said that they've amassed 100,000 troops right on that border. For a long time, we know that this has been a part of the world where there's been a lot of contention. And so we know that this White House has come out and been pretty firm, right? Jen Psaki's statement was not mincing words, saying that we support the Ukrainian people. Blinken is flying over there right now, and we're going to address this thing. Secretary of State Blinken has a post on his website, on the State Department website, from this guy. Remember him? Ned Price. He's the department spokesperson. And if you forgot, I have to remind you, he did go to Harvard and Georgetown. All right. So if you even think about debating with his intelligence or questioning his decisions, think again. He went to Harvard. All right. So just let's get that out of the way. So he tells us that Secretary Blinken is going to the Ukraine and to Germany. A lot of business to attend to over there. This is from his office. Ned Price says that Secretary Blinken is going to travel there from January 18th to the 20th. The trip follows extensive diplomacy with our European allies and our partners about a united approach to address the threat that Russia poses to Ukraine and our joint efforts to encourage it to choose diplomacy and de-escalation in the interest of security and stability. Blinken will begin his trip in Kiev, Ukraine, where he's going to meet with President Vladimir Zelensky and Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba on January 19th. So that's going to be tomorrow. Reinforce the United States' commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So we've got another very interesting kind of chess game playing right here, right? We see something similar happening with Taiwan and the Chinese. Same thing happening here with the Ukraine and the Russians. The secretary will also meet with the employees and the families of the U.S. Embassy to communicate the department's efforts to plan for contingencies should Russia choose to escalate further. So hopefully, again, they hopefully they're able to protect that embassy a little bit better than the last one. On January 20th, Secretary Blinken is going to go to Berlin, Germany, discuss recent diplomatic engagements with Russia and joint efforts to deter future Russian aggression against the Ukraine, including allies, partners' readiness to impose massive consequences and severe economic costs on Russia. Secretary is going to meet with Foreign Minister Babarok, followed by a meeting with the Transatlantic Quad. Secretary's travel and consultations are part of diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the tension caused by the Russia military's buildup and continued aggression against the Ukraine. So, right, it's not insignificant. Okay, this is Russia, top 20 GDP country. We've got severe economic costs if they continue this aggression, massive consequences, and Secretary Blinken took off today. It's flying over there. So we have OSINT Technical on Twitter. They follow some of these VIPs travel, and they can see here that Secretary Blinken is heading over there on U.S. aircraft. He's on the, what aircraft? The SAM 193, Boeing C-32A flying on over there. Here's a photograph of the outside of the plane. Looks like a nice one. But this is what's interesting. So we can start to sort of piece together and glean out of this whole thing what the U.S. policy is going to be. So Ned Price says 30 years ago, Ned Price, the Harvard grad, says that 30 years ago, he probably learned this in a class over there, says the people of Ukraine charted a new course as an independent, democratic, and sovereign state. We will continue to support the Ukraine on this path. Learn more about our enduring relationship. And if you go over to the State Department website, then what we'll see is they've got a whole policy in place where they're going to be addressing this whole thing with the Ukraine. And all this is, I don't know how new it was, but let's see what we can piece together because, man, this would be very convenient. This would be very convenient for the Biden administration if this turned into like a thing that they could like focus on and like be strong and like leadership-y. Like if they could like really turn this into something good, that might be useful for them. So let's see what they're talking about. So they say the United States commitment to the Ukraine's independent sovereignty and territorial integrity is ironclad. Dun, dun, dun. It's coming from Antony Blinken. Does anybody believe that? Does anybody believe that? How about, what if you swap this word in with like Afghanistan? What if we just said the United States commitment to Afghanistan, independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity is ironclad? Does anybody going to believe that from these people? I doubt it. Moscow's action, he says, have threatened a new precedent on European soil whereby basic international principles that are vital to peace are up for debate. Yeah, it's going to threaten a new precedent. Says that the borders and territorial integrity of a state cannot be changed by force unless you're in Afghanistan, that it is inherent right of the citizens in a democracy to make their country's decisions and determine their country's future. Unless you're an Afghani, let's see what else he commits to. That all members of the international community are bound by common rules and should face costs if they don't live up to their solemn commitments that they make. Unless you're the United States involved in Afghanistan. Yeah. Okay, so you can see how this goes. These principles transcend Ukraine. They transcend Europe. They're fundamental rules that underpin the international order. In challenging them, Russia seeks to challenge the international system itself and unravel our transatlantic alliance and pressure democracies into failure. Diplomacy is the only responsible way to solve this crisis. So this is going to be a disaster. I can just see it. It's going to be pretty bad because we can see who's in charge here. Let's see what else fake quotes that are meaningless he has to share with us. Says, we are resolute that a democratic, prosperous, and secure Ukraine is in the interest of not only the people of Ukraine, but also the United States and the international community. Well, okay. So, yeah, I guess some countries are better, I guess, than other countries, I guess is what he's saying, because none of that mattered in Afghanistan. So the United States reaffirms its unwavering support of their sovereignty and their territorial integrity, including its territorial waters. That's nice. U.S.-Ukraine relationship is a cornerstone, and it's going to really help advance its Euro-Atlantic aspirations as this all continues to unfold. So, well, yeah, sounds pretty promising. Now, this goes on and on and on. And let's take a look at a couple more before we wrap it up. But it says, We're going to raise our concerns about Russia's destabilizing actions and violations of the international norms. It's like embarrassing that we even have people like this in charge. Over the past 3 decades, Russia has invaded 3 neighboring countries, Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, interfered in elections, used chemical weapons to attempt assassinations on foreign soil and domestically, Skripal and Navalny, of course, and violated international arms control agreements. We and our allies will be raising those and other issues with Russia in the days and weeks ahead. Wow, I'm sure that's going to go very far with them. Yeah, the same people who are willing to do all of that, they're going to be very angry. They're going to be very, probably shocked. I'm going to imagine that the Russian diplomats are going to be sitting there and they're going to go, "Oh, Blinken, I had no idea that any of this was going on. You're kidding me. We tried to assassinate our own political dissidents. I'm shocked. We're going to get on this right away." So this is the same type of crap that they tried with the Chinese, and it didn't work out very well for them because they went over there and they said, "Hey, we're very angry about what you're doing to the Uyghurs." And the Chinese said, "Well, look at what you're doing to your own community. Look what you did to George Floyd. Look at what's happening in your city streets. How about you deal with your own problems before you talk about our problems," is what they said. And I'm going to guarantee that's what the Russians say, because anytime that you come in here with this nonsense, we and our allies will be raising those issues with Russia. He sounds like Karen at a department store. Raise him up to Putin and see what he has to say about any of this. All right, so he says, we cannot forget Russia's illegal seizure and ongoing occupation of Crimea or conflict. And it just goes on and on. Civilians continue to suffer as Russia's aggression against Ukraine intensifies. Yeah, we know. We all know it. In 2014, after millions of Ukrainians protested for a democratic and European future, Russia manufactured a crisis, invaded, and occupied their territory, resulting in a humanitarian catastrophe that demands the attention from the international community. And here he's telling us that Russia will face massive consequences for renewed aggression. Do you believe that for a minute? Says the United States is consulting very closely with European counterparts on various ways to impose severe consequences from Russia. Together with our allies, we would respond with strong economic measures that would inflict significant costs on the Russian economy and their financial system. This includes powerful actions that we did not pursue in 2014 and are prepared to do now. Blinken is talking a big game out there. Ooh, we didn't do it back then, Putin, but we're about to do it now. Try it. He says, again, today, we see a significant effort to push propaganda against the Ukraine, NATO, and the United States. Oh, the Russians with their propaganda, probably trying to steal another election or something. Russia propaganda efforts include efforts to malign social media operations, the use of overt and covert online Russian-supported media outlets. The infection of disinformation into TV and radio programming, hosting conferences designed to influence attendees into falsely believing that Ukraine, not Russia, is at fault for the tensions. And leveraging cyber operations to deface media outlets that conduct hack and release operations, that is, hacking and then releasing private data and communications. More disinformation, and then we get the preference, which I think everybody can agree to. Nobody wants war. We would prefer a diplomatic path and a diplomatic solution to the situation. But when the problem is when you start to say stuff like that, the other side knows that. When you go in and you say, I have a list of complaints and I'm very upset about these things, and they involve humanitarian issues, and I'm not inclined to fight with you because we really want a strong diplomatic path and a diplomatic solution and all this. Russia knows who they're playing with, okay? They saw this all unfold with the Chinese, and the Chinese just laughed at Antony Blinken. It was embarrassing as an American. We played it here on the show, and Blinken just looked like a dumb deer in headlight. Oh, well, that didn't go as planned, did it? So we'll see how this goes. I wish him the best of luck, honestly. I mean, I don't want to see war break out in any parts of the world, but when you just see people who say a bunch of flowery garbage, promising diplomacy and democracy and adhering to the norms, when, how long ago was this? 6 months ago? They abandoned literally U.S. citizens in Afghanistan. 13 soldiers dead. No state memorials for them, right? We saw what they did for the soldiers after the officers on January 6th after that took place. See any of that same outcry for anybody that was lost in Afghanistan? I didn't. But they'll come out and they'll talk about all this flowery garbage in the context of the Ukraine, and they want you to buy it. I don't, not for a minute. So here's what John Kirby is talking about specifically on the Ukraine. This is the spokesperson from the Pentagon. We spent a lot of time with him back during the Afghanistan catastrophe, and he gets asked about Ukraine here today.
Ukraine, nothing to announce today either with respect to additional defense articles. As we've said all along, we're going to continue to look for ways to help Ukraine defend itself, and that does include additional security assistance. But again, nothing to say today about that. On trainers, I think, as you know, Bob, the Florida National Guard has members.
All right, so not a ton of new announcements on the Ukraine, but he does tell us that there was there's a whole group of people who are over there right now, actually U.S. soldiers, infantrymen, National Guard more specifically, who are over there training the Ukrainian forces on how to, do what they need to do. Here's what Kirby said.
On trainers, I think, as you know, Bob, the Florida National Guard has members currently deployed to Ukraine in this rotating advise and assist capacity. And they remain at work alongside their Ukrainian counterparts, again, advising and assisting and helping train. And we expect that mission will continue. Now, obviously, as I said last week, we're going to continue to watch the situation on the ground. And if we need to make decisions for force protection purposes, we'll do that. But there are no planned additional rotational troops to Ukraine at this time. No changes to what the Florida National Guard is doing on the ground.
So the United States, obviously, helping, mobilizing, and we've heard many times now several commitments, towards ensuring that Ukraine is maintained and that there's nothing problematic that happens. We got one final clip. Speaking about Afghanistan, we've got John Kirby. He gets asked about Afghan Army helicopters that have been commandeered, saying, are those coming back anytime soon, or do you know what's going to happen with those helicopters? Here's what he says.
Hey, thanks, John. Quick question about some Afghan Army helicopters. There were about a dozen that went to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan on August 15th, and now the Taliban is looking to get them back. And I'm just wondering what the Pentagon thinks about that and where the Pentagon feels that those Army helicopters should go. Thanks.
Still working out the disposition of those helicopters, Carla. I don't have an update for you on any decisions about how they will be handled, but I think it's safe to assume that they will not be sent into Afghanistan to be used by the Taliban. But as to what they end up doing and where they end up going and who ends up with them, we're still working our way through that decision-making process.
Those extra helicopters, it's easy to misplace Army helicopters. There's no doubt about it. So that's what's all taking place over in the Ukraine. Had a question over from Rumble. Says, Rob, should we take a vote? Is Putin going to care about Biden, Blinken's point of view? What are we bargaining with? That's from Sedona Rocks 36 over on Rumble, and we're streaming over there. I think it's a good question, right? That's kind of the point of all of it. It's like, what do you have to negotiate with, right? The Russians, the Chinese, they're creating this sort of counterbalance to the United States in many ways. And what does the U.S. have anymore that the Russians are going to go, oh, well, that's, your economic sanctions. That's great. Your economy's in the toilet. You just printed $4.3 trillion that is causing all of your markets to be in literally the toilet as of today. So it's a good question. I'm not sure what there is other than, the standard economic stuff. But does the Biden administration have the stones to do it? Are they going to do anything like that? I'm not sure that they will. Speaking of that, we're going to hear more from Joe Biden tomorrow after he takes his 4-day hiatus to get propped back up and, rejuvenated or whatever. He's speaking tomorrow, going to hold his first press conference of 2022 on Wednesday, the eve of the first anniversary of when he took office. Oh, man, it's going to be the worst. The press conference comes as his presidency and the country is struggling amid the Omicron surge, rising inflation, as his signature legislation, Build Back Better, which is not his, it's the World Economic Forum's plan, which they're meeting today. Talk about them later in the week. CSNBC is going to carry Mr. Biden's press conference live. A poll showed that 50% of Americans are frustrated by his presidency, followed by 49% disappointed, and his overall approval rating is down 44%. Approval fell after the Afghan withdrawal sagged as inflation and COVID cases rose. Press conference is going to be the 10th of his presidency so far, a number lower than his predecessors. White House often points out that Biden frequently takes questions from reporters in less formal settings. Where? Such as during various televised briefings and upon departures. But the White House Correspondents Association argues the best way to know what's on his mind is to hold more frequent organized opportunities where people can ask questions. So we're going to hear from the president tomorrow. We'll see what kind of condition he's in and what he has to say. Hopefully it's coherent, and hopefully he gets a good question or two that we can learn something from. But we'll cover it. I hope you join us. Make sure you subscribe so you can find our videos. And let's take a look at the questions over from our friends at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. I think this was on yesterday's show, so let's go to today's. Sergeant Bob says, someone tell Sleepy Joe the government is not a 9-to-5 job. His failures have been many and massive. Another failure in the Ukraine is more than the USA and the free world can tolerate. So bad, even his corrupt media cannot ignore the circus. Jimmy Carter is smiling. Sleepy Joe has even eclipsed Carter, heretofore the worst president. We've got John Delar says, I'm just going to say this right now. No one cares about Russia or the Ukraine. This isn't the 1980s. The only reason Biden and the media make a big deal of this is because they don't want to deal with China, and this is a distraction. The Democrats talk about Russians interfering into an election. Well, they didn't release a virus like China to destroy Trump's chances at a second term. China got the president they wanted. This whole Russia-Ukraine thing is a joke. Concentrate on China. I think that's probably true. I think that there's some good, astute points there. Kenny 1B says, unless the U.S. NATO is willing to use nuclear weapons in theater to defend the Ukrainian sovereignty, a Russian invasion cannot be stopped. Russia has large quantities in the thousands of battlefield tactical nuclear weapons in the region, and they are willing to use them if necessary to prevent a retreat after invading. All that could be done is to change the Russian calculus by supplying the Ukrainians with lethal aid, making an invasion too costly in the hopes of deterring an invasion from starting in the first place. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I was kind of hoping we'd get some of these comments because they are very interesting. Let's see what's going on over on YouTube. Oh my God, this is awesome, LOL, says many thanks for the virtual Davos WEF shenanigans coverage. Yeah, we'll talk more about them. If you missed that show yesterday, make sure you watch that one because that was a doozy. It really shows you kind of who's in charge of everything and how it works. And you see Klaus Schwab and you see President Xi and you see everybody else. Today, I think we had Japan and Israel were speaking. The prime minister of both of those countries were speaking at the World Economic Forum today. And so I'll watch those and maybe we'll talk about those tomorrow or later on in the week. But very interesting stuff going on over there. They're literally planning out the future. Raheem with a super chat. Thank you, Raheem. I appreciate that. C. Reed says Putin has got to be confused. The USA is so worried about the Ukrainian border, but they leave their own open? Huh. Curious. Yeah. And we don't even send any of our executive or branch officials to our border. Like Antony Blinken's at least going there. Did Kamala ever go to the border? Didn't she like drive by it and like stick her head out the window? I think she did recently. I don't remember. Maybe she didn't. Doesn't matter. The point is they don't do anything. They're a lot more concerned about everybody else's borders rather than our own. So yeah, that's fun. Another one from Not Applicable says age limit 75. Let's amend. No more zombie presidents. Look, yes, I know. And it's like a sensitive topic because I have the most reverence for elderly people, the seniors, right? People who are further along in the journey in life. I have the most reverence. I just listen to their stories and it's like, it's wisdom, right? I really value wisdom. And so when I rip on Joe, I feel sort of bad about it, but I'm ripping on him because he's the president in this condition, not because he's an elderly gentleman. Okay, I want to be clear about that. I have to make sure we're clear about that. The president should not be in this shape. Okay, anybody else in the world, fine. It's fine. But not the president. Just want to make sure we're clear on that. No zombie presidents. I agree with, oh my God, this is awesome, LOL. C. Reed says, remember the meltdown at Chernobyl? Where was that? In Chernobyl, right? It's a great series on HBO about that, man. That one left a mark for sure. Co-Row with a nice super chat, nice donation. Thank you for that, Co-Row. And then Not Applicable says, Dems pulled missile defense out of the Ukraine. They're on Russia and China side. Stalinist, Maoist, the DNC is a domestic enemy, and their goal is concessions. Yeah, so that's another good point, right? The idea being that Russia is not really, they don't want to go in there and maybe actually seize the Ukraine or that disputed territory. But they would like some negotiating room. And if you have the U.S. Secretary of State crashing in there, what is it going to take for you to stop this? We'll give you whatever you want. And they do, because the Biden administration can't handle another failure in this arena. Nadler's Dirty Diaper is here. Says, so I'm now at 43.5 pounds after leakage. And I was told I just might be infectious with corona. Help me. That's Jerry Nadler, who is a congressman who every time you see him, he's waddling around like this. Everywhere he goes. His diaper's full. That's why. It has to be changed. It's at 43.5 pounds now. I don't keep tracks on this, folks. I know we hit 40 some time ago. I know we crossed a 40 threshold sometime. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We're almost a year into this presidency. I don't think I have no faith this administration is going to change him. They could have done it. They're not interested in doing it. We're probably going to have to living with this dirty diaper. Sergeant Bob says the judge would instruct the witness, you will answer the question. Maybe Judge Judy should come after the lying redhead. And is not the White House Sleepy Joe's home for the duration of the term? It comes with the territory. I agree with that. I was kind of taken aback by that comment too. Well, that's his home. Well, he's a president. Shouldn't he living in the White House? Mama Goob says, tests mess. Where are the treatments, Sleepy Joe? Where are the antibodies, the antivirals? He should be held to account for the supply chain issues with the treatments. To me, this is a high crime. Yeah, the idea that different states are being limited, right, in their supply on some of these treatments, some of these therapeutics, because they're manipulating the numbers is repulsive, right? Let the markets just work. But we're hearing a lot about this, right? Equity and all sorts of different, balancing the resources, which is communism. So get used to it. Sergeant Bob says, the new milk carton, Sleepy Joe joins cackling Kamala as missing. Well, I hope he has been missing from the White House. That is for sure. Vienticus Prime says it's hypochondria. Certainly feels like that over there. We'll see where it goes. Thunder7 says, Rob, that was Stephen Nelson. Thank you for the update. Stephen Nelson from the New York Post that Psaki snapped at and lost her cool with. New York Post, just about the only media apart from the Epic Times that reports real news and asks the hard questions. Her arrogance towards him is only matched by her sheer ignorance. I rename her the redheaded demon liar, liar, pants on fire. I miss Kayleigh McEnany. Redheaded demon liar, liar, pants on fire. All right, that's a good one. I like it. All right, so she's certainly a spinster. There's no doubt about that. But those were good questions, right? Those are the kinds of questions that you want to answer to. So I would love to know that. Psaki, there were a bunch of people on the Zoom meeting saying that they told you that we needed to test back in October, and they had a great plan in place to avoid all of this. Who was on the call, and was Joe Biden briefed about it? Yes or no? Well, and she goes in, the Defense Authorization Act and blah, blah, blah. Not much there. So I thought it was a great question. I thought she was a little bit condescending to him, but that's what she does. President Trump says, everything was under control when I was in the White House. Putin and Xi wouldn't dare try anything new, as they knew I meant business. I was exchanging love letters to Kim to prevent the deep state from reading our communication, which is true. He went over there and like jumped across that line. I signed peace treaties in the Middle East, which everyone said I would never accomplish. By the way, Russian, not interested in invading Ukraine. They could have invaded and taken the country in 2 weeks. More false flags by NATO, the EU, and Biden. Well, it would be very convenient for them if this was a distraction. That's true, right? They already know that their base is in hyperventilation mode anytime you mention the Russians. They go, well, they almost stole America. Did you know that? The Russians almost stole America. So they can just say, oh, the Russians are at it again. And boom, everybody who voted blue's like, I knew it. It's a good thing Trump's not in there because he was their puppet. And now we have somebody who's not their puppet. And then you have Antony Blinken, who's like, I'm a real tough diplomatic negotiator. Look at my record. I've solved a lot of things diplomatically. I dealt with the Chinese and I dealt with Afghanistan. And now I'm going to go deal with Russia. Oh, my goodness. What else do we have? We've got Robute. Says, yeah, President Brandon threatening new sanctions on Russia when Americans has shortages on fossil fuels, gas prices going through the roofs. Yeah, impose further sanctions on the largest natural gas producer, and fossil fuels will go well in America with shortages around. And Brandon shutting down the pipelines. That's my point. What are they going to do? Right? Because consequences go both ways. Monster One says, Rob, it snowed here in North Carolina on Sunday. The local government has yet to clear the roads. Been stuck for days. Can I sue them? You always can sue everybody, right? That's always the answer. Anytime anybody says, can I sue them? The answer is always yes. Yeah, sue anybody you want. Are you going to succeed? No. Because it's the government. They're basically immune from most things. File a notice of claim, but the courts are going to find that generalized complaints about the performance of the government, it's not an actionable, it's not a justiciable issue. It's sort of like if you want to sue the government because you're mad that the quality of something is poor, right? Unless it's like really, really bad, you're not going anywhere. They're immune from virtually everything. They owe you nothing. Ray Epps is here. Says, just a reminder, I'm watching the Watchers. Ray Epps, I think, is meeting with the January 6th Select Committee this week. Did you see that? I saw that today, that Ray Epps, J6 Committee, I think it's happening this Friday. Let's see what we've got here. Yeah, Politico's reporting this ridiculous story. It's hilarious. So here is what Politico is saying. We've got a little extra time here. It says, figure at the center of the pro-Trump January 6th theory is going to speak with the Select Committee on Friday. Ray Epps, the former Arizona Oath Keeper at the center, intends to sit for a transcribed interview Friday with the Select Committee. So that's going to be, of course, Liz Cheney, Benny Thompson, all these J6ers, which is really neat. Epps, who's been the centerpiece of an unsupported GOP claim, says that the FBI incited the mob, met with the January 6th Select Committee in November, told them he's got no relationship with the FBI or other federal law enforcement agency. But the meeting is just a precursor to a more formal transcribed interview this week. We'll see. We'll see what that interview has to show, right? Epps was seen in footage just before 1 p.m. on January 6th, whispered something in the ear of Ryan Samsel, been charged as one of the first defendants to breach the Capitol grounds. Moments later, yeah, he was there. He's all over the place. So other people have been charged. Ray Epps has not been charged. Ray Epps was on the FBI's most wanted list, but then was taken off. So apparently he's going to be meeting with the committee this Friday. It's going to be transcribed, whatever that means. So are they going to transcribe everything from beginning to end? Or are we just going to see the little snippets that they want us to see? It's going to be a joke, I'm sure of it. So we'll see where that one goes. Let's see what else we've got. That was Ray Epps in the house. Hand of Nod says, Rob, on testing, I've been ill the past couple of weeks with a viral infection in the sinuses. Local VAMC assured me it's the COOF or 21 other viruses they sweep in the test. I write this to point out that the vid is only a small part of the many ways that people are vulnerable. I will be fine. On the Ukraine, nobody in Russia or Ukraine will believe Blinken. They live much closer to China and Afghanistan. U.S. actions are greater than any diplomat's words. Further, a decision will soon be made. Recall the uproar of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Ukraine is a satellite state of Moscow. We cannot arm and militarize Ukraine without provoking distrust. I personally can't condemn a sovereign for securing its borders. Lastly, retaking Ukraine grants trade options that could easily exceed U.S. sanctions. Besides, Germany is beholden for fuel. Krauts switched off their nuclear reactors, and nearly all of the EU is subsidized by Germany. Stay vigilant. Hand of Nod. Good comment from Hand of Nod. Now, is that a pejorative for Germans? I'm also German, so I said that word because it doesn't offend me, but I think that might be pejorative. So if it offends any Germans out there, please don't engineer me to death. So that's a great comment. Now, I think there's a lot of truth to that. You know, I think oftentimes in the United States, especially in this new world, we're recognizing that the other countries just don't. The U.S. word doesn't mean as much anymore. I mean, and that's a very recent thing. We made a 20-year commitment in Afghanistan, lost thousands of lives over there, abandoned the country in a matter of weeks. So anything that they say now, I think, is just like kind of laughable, really. Joe Biden says, Rob, I'm in great condition and very coherent, except I need a hiatus, says Joe. No one you know says, may or may not be on topic. I will make this statement, question, and listen for a response later. The State of the Union is scheduled for March 1st at 9 p.m. I do my due diligence and regularly listen to the entirety of Biden's speeches and press meetings. He's only good for about 15 to 20 minutes before he starts to fade. He's better in the morning. Most of the time he speaks, there is nothing in his schedule for at least a few hours before the event. So for the State of the Union, does anyone think he can make it for a full hour? Will he make it a shorter one or possibly bring in Kamala? Worth keeping an eye on this as it gets closer. No one you know. I agree with that. And that's part of the reason why I pointed out his calendar, right? He's off for like 4 days before you see anything consequential. They announced this press conference last week, right? They said he's going to come out, as they should. But so my point is they're prepping a lot for this thing, including giving him literally 4 days off before the press conference. So why is that? I don't know. Robert Gouveia. Did I write this? Somebody said I wrote this. Let's see. I don't know what this is. Hello, watching the watchers. I don't know what this is. So it's a big one. I'm going to skip it. We have another one here from Bumma Lickett. Says, hi, Rob. Hello, beautiful people of the watchers. With everything that's going on, should we send our athletes in China for the Winter Olympics? Well, no, I don't think so. I mean, the China, look, what side of the equation do you want to be on? Okay. Do you want to play ball with the Chinese or are you mad at the Chinese? So pick one, pick a side. And I think that they are not, their interests are opposed to the United States interests. And so at some point you have to start to draw the line. Monster One says, everyone and their grandma was arrested for just being there. Do they really expect anyone to believe Ray Epps wasn't involved? Well, that's the point. It's like, why did everybody else get arrested for even looking at the Capitol building incorrectly? Why is that? But Ray Epps did not. Now he's going to come out. I didn't work with the FBI. Okay, well, did you work with anybody else? Right? A lot of other agencies. So he's going to be very careful with his words, and we're going to have to parse those out. And we're going to see what type of transcript and how many details we get out of it. Monster One says, did you see Joe Biden compare George Floyd to MLK? Is this the level that we are at? I did see that. I think that was from 2020, right? And so Joe Biden is looking a little bit more, he still looks very bad in that video, but a little bit better than currently. And he says, yeah, I mean, not even Martin Luther King had the same global impact that George Floyd did. And he rips off his mask. He's like, you know what I'm saying? And everybody's looking at him like, what did you say? Psycho person? We've got member of the public over on Rumble, says Chucky. Vientikis is over there, says, we're live over here over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com as well. And I think we've got one more question before we wrap it up. We've got Monster One says, are you going to cover Ray Epps on Friday? Well, we'll see. I mean, if there is anything useful to talk about then, like if they release the transcript, we'll certainly talk about it. Not Applicable says, whatever we do, don't give the Germans an army. Bad idea. Yeah, you don't want to anger the Germans. They can assemble a force relatively quickly. But that, my friends, is it for us for the day. I want to welcome some new members over to our watchingthewatchers.locals.com community. We've got some new signups. We've got big shout outs to AZ Grayman, who's in the house. We've got Mr. Shields, welcome. Nora MC is in the house. We've got LG00. Angry Bear is in the house with Sassy Steph 2. We've got Ratbag 13, Ocean Lover, Free Mind. We've got Humphrey's dad, who is in good company because Rob's mom is also here. We've got Shiraz 31. We've got Farid X is here. The Brink, Lina, Piper _. We've got Todd Hupp. Suspicious Chick is in the house with Aussie Lawyer, Green Tutka. We've got S. Baker, Gotcha Good, Jim 2008, and Falcone US and Y are all in the house. And I hope that everybody will join us at our watchingthewatchers.locals.com monthly meetup. That's taking place this Saturday, January 22nd, 7 to 8:30 p.m. or so. And it's a lot of fun. So we all meet up on Zoom. You got to register. You got to sign in and all that stuff. But if you join us, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to spend a little bit of the first part of the Watching the Watchers meetup talking to somebody who's a very special part of our community, Sergeant Bob. Sergeant Bob's going to be there with Miss Lucky. And Sergeant Bob wrote this book. It's called Cop Talk. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. I don't know how much time we'll spend, maybe 10, 15 minutes or so going through it. Let me show you this chapter that I found. Chapter 23. Never lie to your mother, okay? A lot of important lessons in this book. Sergeant Bob is an awesome guy, and so he's going to come, and we're going to talk about him and his book and some of his lessons. He's a sergeant, former sergeant. So come join us on that Saturday, January 22nd, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll go for about an hour and a half. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sergeant Bob will be there. I hope you're there as well. And so I am going to release, I've got a couple other releases that are coming out tonight. I think I'm going to get Dan Crenshaw video out. Dan Crenshaw got into it with this young lady who asked him a question about his faith, talking about archetypes and talking about Jesus, whether Jesus is real or Jesus is a fictional character. Weird situation. So I've got that that is going to be published. I recorded another one. What was it about? I can't remember, but I got to edit those. I'll publish those a little bit later. That, my friends, is it for me for the show. I want to thank you for being a part of it, and I hope to see you again here tomorrow. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. Sleep well. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.